Some interesting cirrus up there today, but then I'm also seeing this guy, nice little Continental United or United Continental, whatever you want to call them anymore. You call it condensed airlines all into one, and it's very easy to control. Very easy to control, but this 747 is low. He's slow. I mean, it's stupid how low he is. This isn't safe, slow. This isn't safe. Oh, come on. Zoomed in too far. I'm gonna iris down a little bit. So maybe we can get some colors or some paint. Air on the front. Get readjusted, but no trail. He's just low. I mean, this isn't safe. It just isn't safe for these guys to be flying through these mountains this low. Why does it keep going out all the way? There he is. He's over the mountains. Interesting. Here's some of the freaky cirrus overhead. All have this one bar and some point, and then multiple tendrils, multiple chicken feet, multiple extensions coming out from. And then, of course, as they're pushed across the sky, then the crystals, the particles, what is condensed, then weeps out. But it's always kind of this central seam that I'm interested in. Why does the cloud have this split right down the middle of it? What's up with that? Had an incredibly blue sky day. We saw those cirrus clouds earlier this morning. What trails have been focused mostly on the cirrus shield to the south and some activity to the west. And occasionally there's a little bit of something that comes on drifting through. But this has just shown up. First it was the two stripes, and then this plane has come through. He's still extending off towards Challenger and Crestone Peak. And so once this showed up, then you can see right in through here. Another set of clouds has just begun to manifest. It wasn't there before, so the trails came first, and then the clouds. Not clouds forming from the trails, but clouds forming at the boundary of a trail. So they mark it, and then the clouds manifest. To the west, there's the trails. So they just, these are not contrails, this is something else. These are the chemtrails, obviously. Another marking one there. And then over the horizon. Just a quick scan of the horizon, off to my west. There's our sun, so we're within an hour of sunset. There's that cloud I looked at earlier. You can see that it's hanging in there. And it is not going anywhere. And how this edge of it just continues to grow. So, persistent contrail doesn't matter. It's a mark. It's a mark, and it was left by the weather makers for some reason. Some boundary was there. And then there's just a ton of other little teeny tiny trails persist for 3 to 12 seconds or so. And then there's the ones across just above the mountains we showed you a bit ago. You can't see those from where I am. I'm too close to the mountains. The mountains are too tall. That's off to the east. But the cloud above those trails continue to expand. So they leave their mark. The clouds come in. It's It's happened time and time and time and time again. Close to sunset now, getting real close to sunset. Here's that trail. It just continues on. And notice, I find interesting, right in the middle of it, you can see how there's a change of behavior. It's a little more altocumulus-like on top, but then right in the middle, the bottom half changes. Scallops on the top, and then weeping on the bottom. It's dripping out. So this all from one single trail. We have this grand cloud that extends for many, many miles. And then this other one through here comes off the horizon. And look at that gap. Why does that whole trail need a fat segment missing out of it? Did he either turn it off, turn it on? Or what's the deal? Was there just something there that the trail didn't adhere to? There's another trail here. You can see how the bottom coming up this way hits this cloud, and all of a sudden it bends and curls, twists. It twists on this upper segment. Why the break? Why the tear? Why the fold? Why the accordion action? Right there. There's something happening with that trail. And then we've lost sun. Sun is just now set. And there's our moon for the night as it moves through Sagittarius. So that's probably it for tonight, guys. Thanks for watching. Alright guys, I wanted to share something with you because occasionally I just get these gems that show up in my email box, weatherwars@gmail.com. I read everything. I don't respond to everything. There isn't a way. But what I want to show you, and this is great, I love this because this is a black and white, high resolution, time-lapse photography. So we're not seeing the colors, all we're seeing is a luminance difference. And already we wake up this morning, or he wakes up, and we have the sunrise, it's coming up. But more importantly, it probably should have been one of those perfect blue sky days. And what I'm interested in is how these trails are parting over here. I'm interested in how this trail here is running underneath this one, and rapidly so. I'm also interested in how this trail and this trail, actually, when we play it forward, we'll see that they both fail in here. There's an X, and then the other half of the X is missing. And then this trail overtakes this trail as it races across the screen. You can see it's just running out ahead of it. Boom, it races through it. Two planes coming through, a third marking one comes along, and here's this trail. All of a sudden, it's now ahead of it in this race. And what's interesting, I want to go back here a little bit, is that we have these marks, these kinks right in through here. And these second planes come along and mark them. Now this one that we just saw race through here, coming right on back, and I wish I had a quick time of this rather than we're trying to play this with a flash player on YouTube. It's not very glorious, not very elegant, as Romney would say. But what we have is right here. You can see where this trail remains largely intact. We have the spreading that comes on through here, reaches an apex, and then begins to come on back. But this plane came along and hit that tangent. It hit that point of spread. It hit that spot precisely, and then continues on. And on this angle, it's going to run into something else. It'll hit probably another significant spot in this trail than this one if we were overlooking. But the precision is unreal with these particular craft. So we'll watch it again. Boom, hits that spot. We still continue to see the spread. Previous trails come along, all kinds of ripplings and angles through these. This trail also running out ahead and underneath of these previous two. It's phenomenal. And then we have all of this in here that is showing up. Nice big dent in here that is essentially invisible, but it's curious. Boom, the other side of the wavelength, and now we have the powders, the aerosols being stripped out off to the south. Because from the look at this, we're in a decidedly northwesterly flow in the particular jet stream, and this guy's got a great view of the east. I'm just a touch bit envious. I've got a view to the west, but not to the east. And then we can see how the clouds begin to fill in, completely begin to fill in. And in here, with this particular trail, I'm going to go back just a touch, and maybe even a little bit more, because it's this rippling It's this rippling in here that has my attention. Come back a touch more and hope that ScreenFlow doesn't crash again. It doesn't seem to like me rewinding this. This is the 5th time I've recorded this. And so you see how the trails are being spread out, and this plane hit that spot precisely. It's phenomenal, the accuracy of these flights. And you know, it isn't at all the fact that there's chemicals up there, or that they're chemtrails or contrails. It's the fact that these trails are revealing anomalies in the sky that is important to me, that is significant to me, and that it has a direct role in our weather. And Environment Canada is the same as NOAA or the EPA, whether it's in the States, whether it's in Europe or Australia or New Zealand, now in South America. You know, we've lost our skies. We have lost our skies. And that's honestly about all we can say to it. So we can share this information with each other, and we can share this information with each other. And if we share it, you know, rather sanely, then we can possibly do something about it. So this was a TED show, just so you got that in there. All right, I'm going to put this on pause, and we're going to get on with the discussion for the day. High pressure settled into the east. There's still a whole lot of a mess to clean up. Long Island, Staten Island, the Jersey Shore. That was a brutal storm. It was an utterly brutal storm. And looking at the extended maps that we'll get here in about 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, there's another nor'easter that tries to come up. Well, some of the models have some rain encroaching on the Cape area and not quite to Delmarva and the Jersey Shore, but it's another close call. So that's something we're going to be watching for on the 22nd. So that's about 5 days out. But otherwise, over most of the country, it was just really a beautiful, beautiful day. You can see it mid to late afternoon, beautiful 60s and 70s across Texas. The air is dry, dew points in the 20s, low 20s at that. There is some return moisture as the flow off the Gulf now begins to come up the Rio Grande. Some of that return moisture is working into New Mexico, although very slowly. But otherwise, it's just chilly and sunny all the way from the Appalachia through the Great Lakes states, finally enjoying some sunshine across the Dakotas. Lots of chemtrails, as we'll see, through Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana. Those are in place. The wet weather is out west, associated with this low pressure system that's on the far southern tip of the panhandle of Alaska. Juneau with some rain through Seattle, some moderate rain at Bremerton, some heavier rain into Vancouver, rain into Portland, and then down into the coastal areas, Crescent City, California, Eureka. Hopefully it'll make it into the northern Sierra and Siskiyous. They can use the water. It has been so very, very dry there. But otherwise, it really has been a pretty sweet Saturday across the nation. Where is it cold? The Northwest Territories, Yukon, northern Alberta, and Alaska, 10 below, 0 here with some light snow, -2. The red number is the temperature. The green number is the dew point, -13 over -17 temperature over dew point, -24. And again, this is mid to early afternoon for the last frontier for Alaska, with a cold Arctic high, situated across the Bering Sea all the way through the northern tier of Canada. So it is cold, 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 cold up there. We'll pop down to the visible imagery towards sunset for Missouri, and you can see the striped trails. There's a nice little asterisk in the sky. Somebody south of Lawrence, probably around Emporia, Kansas, might have photographed this particular phenomenon where we have the 3 trails crossing with the center point there. That would have been a nice picture. Maybe somebody in Overland Park, Kansas caught that. I'd like to see that picture. And then the trail's a little bit thinner as you move into Nebraska, but they were intense through Illinois at sunset, across Michigan. They were intense, Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, and then, of course, through Quebec and Ontario. It doesn't matter U.S. or Canada, wherever any nation that has subscribed to the Open Skies Treaty seems to be subject to this, and certainly all NATO powers are. And then here's a little bit of a storm action off the coast of the Carolinas, and you can see the little magnetic field lines coming off this, and then the contrary rippling that shows up as well. And it's my opinion that nearly all of our weather is manufactured at this point. There is some force, some energy playing in it, and that knowledge was shared with our government in the 40s and 50s, and they have felt the need to intercede on behalf of Mother Nature with regard to our weather with just about every event. There's a few more chemtrails south of Midland, Texas, and some rather curious cirrus clouds that I'm up here, and so right at sunset I was able to photograph some of this off into the distance. Let's pop to the west. Here's a brighter view of that cirrus shield across Arizona, New Mexico, into Texas, and then of course the moisture continues into Mexico, where there are chemtrails once again visible. So Mexico subject to this action as well. You think you can, leave the States, you can leave the Western world and be free of this, and I'm sorry to disappoint you. It isn't so. It simply isn't so. And then lots of clouds to the west, although the organized precipitation is largely focused to this frontal band. And with the rains now moving on shore, we need rains, from Blue Canyon all the way through Susanville, up north into Eureka. We all need rain. The rains have got to begin. When you get to Nevada, you kind of see some concentric circle patterns showing up. So all of the clouds, and I say that rather emphatically, are subject to these waves. You can see all of them punctuated with the ripples, with the waves, and then the holes embedded therein. And that continues all the way down across Tonopah, Area 51, down through Clark County, and then over Lake Havasu, on the western side of the Grand Canyon, and all through Utah. And you need chemtrails to keep all of these holes in alignment. And it is from these holes that the resonances emerge, which allow the weather to appear. Here's a nice hole here with a flare or a splash. It's much like you've got a boat here, and this is running in this direction because there's even a flare out ahead of it. And then as the propeller drives the boat forward, you have the spray emitting or being shot out of the back of the boat. And you see that here, you see that here, and with the geometry out ahead of it. And it happens on small scales, and it happens on grand scales. And so the Pacific is rather unsettled and cool with the instability clouds there. All right, let's pop over the imagery, and then I'll move the forecast out just a touch. All right, here's what's happening in the North Pacific. Pop on the water vapor imagery. It's this little phenomena here, this little squirt out. This is a fascinating feature. This is wrong. If there's ever an indication that there's something happening with the weather that is wholly anomalous, it is this right here. And that happened midday out over the mid-Pacific, and nobody's looking at it, but this is a huge anomaly showing up. Far more so than much of Sandy. Sandy can be thrown in as a normal storm, but this is just bizarre with a capital B. And then there's plenty of chemtrails on the edge of this. The oranger areas, the pinker areas, the darker reds are actually the drier stretches of the atmosphere. So it's easier to see where the chemtrails sequester the moisture with those barium salts and aluminins and so forth as they create the clouds. But this is rather fascinating. Here's the storm coming out of the west coast, and then the cold anchored across Alaska and the polar regions. And this unsteady pattern, this unsettled pattern, continues to impact the western states for quite some time. As we looked at the chemtrails on the visible imagery, here they are in the water vapor imagery, rewinding over the last 12 hours or so, marching from essentially the Missouri River Valley across and through the western lake states. And all of these clouds are a result of them seeding that with these aerosols and these particulates. They wouldn't be here otherwise. And then the mess across Michigan is part and parcel of these projects as well. Into the west, there's another vantage point, and we can see the chemtrails on the leading edge of this plume of Pacific moisture as it plunges and begins to essentially dig out this trough here. Here's the subtropical plume coming off the mid-Pacific, or at least the northern portion of the tropical Pacific, into the southwest and then into the Lone Star State. But this is all North Pacific. This is all cold air, and so the results are going to be, well, much chillier. And see that tropical plume is kind of out of view in here. So this is the Pacific, and this is essentially where all the weather is going to remain. Out west as this Pacific drives in, the storm drives in. But a baggy, weak trough through the eastern states, so I would expect to see unsettled weather along the Carolinas as this thing kind of closes off. It is an exceedingly slow mover simply because there's nothing coming behind it to push it along. There is no domino upstream of it to knock it over, to push it out of the way. So this is going to wander to the east for a bit. For the west, the center of the trough is west of Anchorage by a good bit, and this kind of just hangs out in the west. It sits out of the Gulf of Alaska as we close the weekend and begin Monday morning. The trough off the southeastern states kind of gets offshore a little bit, but the flow is rather weak, but it is steady from the west. These little ripples, every one of them will be accentuated to a great degree by hundreds of chemtrails. That has been the past, and it will be the future. So we look for chemtrails out through Manitoba, the leading edge of the Dakotas, and Wisconsin and Minnesota, western Ontario on Monday morning. Same thing for the Ohio River Valley Monday morning. Probably northern North Carolina Monday morning. And then if there's still some of this tropical moisture working in across Mexico and Texas, I'd expect to see the northern edge of that punctuated with chemtrails Monday morning. By Tuesday, a little bit of a ridge. They like to work the areas of high pressure as well. So I'd be curious to see feedback Tuesday morning. The Dakotas, Iowa, and then the storm drops from Alaska off to on a latitude not par with maybe the 50 latitude north. There's still a hole that sits back here. There's still a portion of the low that retains, that hangs back. But it's this low that begins to develop a little bit that could be curious and feed into this guy, kind of pull it back ashore. Remember, this was sitting here off the coast. That was the clouds off the Carolina coast today. So each one of these maps is a step of 24 hours. And 12Z Monday is 6 a.m. Monday Central Time. And so this trough comes on through that almost completely pushes that trough out to see this little red zone. But as we can see, this low begins to build a little bit. There's some energy on the backside. When you see the darker reds on the western side of the trough, and essentially, this is not a hard and fast rule, but it means the storm is going to dig. It is going to intensify further. And this was the situation with Sandy. This low dug to the west, and then Sandy had nowhere to go because it had to climb out of the developing trough, and that just could not happen. So it trapped Sandy, and you can see the low begin to form. The low, here's the 564 height line, which almost completely cuts off. It could have closed off this low. We have two close contours, so it's going to be a fairly slow mover. The rest of the jet stream remains along the U.S.-Canadian border, so that's where the sensible weather will remain. And Thursday morning, chemtrails, southern Illinois, Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and then probably some out west as well. And as we close down this 6-day forecast, this low pushes out to sea, and a large, generally flat, uneventful ridge sets up across the U.S., and that means that largely the weather is going to be boring. Here's the cold high sitting across the east of 5-4 line. The darker black line is essentially a rough rain snow line, but all of this is chilly high pressure. With a low off the west coast. The low sits off the west coast. We do begin to get some non-shore flow, so the rain should continue along the Pacific Northwest coast. The high begins to retreat eastward off to the Canadian Maritimes as we get to Monday morning. And the return flow still is kind of weak. We do have a nice southerly flow out ahead of this storm over north central Canada, but there's not a lot of moisture with it. It's a relatively dry event. And then we begin to see our wannabe northeaster begin to come together Tuesday morning. So again, I'd be curious for trails along the Carolinas up to the Jersey Shore on Tuesday morning. And then you can see its distance offshore is fairly significant, but the whole of the northeast, the eastern seaboard, and even the mid-Atlantic coast will be in a northeast flow. It will be in a breezy condition, and then see it winds up. And this is where the model drama happens. Some of the models have it a little bit closer to the coast, wherein rainfall could happen from Hatteras through Atlantic City, Rehoboth Beach, Cape May, the Hamptons on up to Provincetown. That's a possibility. And then it pushes out to sea. So we'll eventually have to see what happens. But that's kind of a rough look out, a quick look at precipitation. And then here's the rains on the west coast with some possibly, fingers crossed, all the way down to Southern California. They could use some water on these mountains before we have any threat of Santa Ana's. To my awareness, that has not happened yet this season because we haven't had a deep cold high, prominent high set up across the western states. And that this is the time of year that happens. So the next 24 hours are relatively important, essentially today and tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, and early Monday, Saturday and Sunday in particular for California to get any rains. A few showers may show up. Chemtrails, of course, leading the edge of this on Monday morning. I've hit that a couple of times. Here's that nor'easter trying to develop and bringing a little bit of a rain shield back. The rain's still ongoing through the Pacific Northwest into the Bitterroots of Idaho, possibly even some flurries as far inland as Yellowstone. And then the storm just barely grazes the Massachusetts and Rhode Island coastline. And these models are subject to change. They always do. But the GFS, the one we're looking at presently, has been pretty reliable. As we jump out 6 to 10 days from the Climate Prediction Center, we are looking at temperatures way above normal, especially centered over the Great Basin. With normal highs typically 50s, we are looking at middle and upper 60s, which keeps the vegetation thinking, should I have shed my leaves yet? And of course, the browns being dry. So no precipitation except for the northwest coast along the U.S.-Canadian border. Alaska remains dry as well, even as we pop out towards 1 December. The west is warm and the east begins to cool off. That largely because of that cool northeasterly breeze coming in off the Atlantic this time of year. And nearly the entirety of the southern three-quarters of the nation is dry. We pop out the 1 month and look at the entirety of the December forecast. This was made just 2 days ago on 15 November, with the southern tier continuing to be dry, actually this is temperature-wise, cool up north, warm in the south, and then equal chances, that's what EC represents either way for temperature, with the Ohio Valley looking for above normal precip. We pop out 3 months through December, January, and February. Same area, Lower Ohio Valley, Tennessee River valleys, above normal chances of precipitation. In California, with the failed development of El Nino, they look to be rather dry, and that's too bad, because here in southern Colorado we could have absolutely used the precipitation. There's our drought monitor issued on Thursday, the 13th of November, and the west is pretty. The drought is pretty extensive. There's these deep reds are ugly. It's ugly for farmers. It's ugly for well owners. It's ugly, and it's too extensive to be in place this late in the year. So that's kind of a look at the forecast. Thanks for watching, and boy, folks, share this. Everybody can see the chemtrails. It's difficult, if not impossible, to hide them. And they have been able to get away with it for coming up on 60 years. I think they began these programs in the 50s. And we have the first pictures of experimentation of those trails in the early 50s, 53, 54 time range. And so they've kind of been playing with it ever since. And this is something we need to get ended. This has to end, because this planet needs her breath back. And these weird events like this out in the Pacific just shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. But they go wholly unnoticed unless you're looking for them. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Keep looking up. Here we are on the horizon. And we'll look at satellite imagery here in a bit. And we'll see just how thick the trails have been. All the way through the western U.S. With that storm coming off the west coast, trails here, arced through cloud here, and there's kind of a shelf, steps down, another level spot, steps down. And so these planes were flown, these flights, these trails were left at a diagonal. Focus. So, I'm losing my light. Not going to push it like we did the other night. But that's the sky. And the moon that we saw a little bit earlier. And then, this is where the trails have been, off towards New Mexico. And this incredible deck of clouds. Trail. There's a pretty crazy sharp ring there, sharp edge. It's pretty pronounced. So, anyway, there you go, guys. There you go. Enough is enough.